One of the great American pastimes is finding a new way to cheese the 5e Tarrasque. It's honestly the saddest monster in the whole monster manual. Here's the flavor text to describe it. Legendary destruction. The destructive potential of the Tarrasque is so vast that some cultures incorporate the monster into religious doctrine, weaving its sporadic appearance into stories of divine judgment and wrath. Legends tell how the Tarrasque slumbers in its secret lair beneath the earth, remaining in a dormant state for decades or centuries. When it awakens in answer to some inscrutable cosmic call, it rises from the depths to obliterate everything in its path. Here's how it actually goes. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. In previous editions, the Tarrasque was actually a threatening enemy. Almost every Wizards of the Coast stat block is like this. Lots of hype only to get cheesed by a random saving throw or fly speed. They're sacks of hit points with no interesting traits, attacks, or anything really. In this episode of Why Your Monsters Suck, we're going to use the Tarrasque as our running example to discuss how to make good traits. The first design principle is that your fantasy can be represented by numerical realities. We as Dungeon Masters are not beholden to the boring stat blocks in the books. We can make new mechanics or modify existing mechanics that fit a concept or fantasy we want. The concept of a Tarrasque is an overpowering force of nature whose only language is destruction. Magic should be its chew toy. It should destroy civilizations and threaten worlds. Those who face it should only expect to delay the inevitable. It is an existential threat. This will be our core theme that guides the rest of our mechanical design. Right now, a group of 5 level 10 wizards could turn it into a frog with enough attempts of polymorph. Its traits aren't doing enough to enforce its fantasy. This is our first design principle. Make your fantasy your reality. When we make our traits, we have to make sure they prevent events that violate the creature's fantasy and enable it to deliver on its expectations and themes. When you're designing, always refer back to your core theme and see if your rules are consistent with the concept. You don't like that some bushes can halve its speed? Okay, in one of your traits you can write that it ignores speed penalties in difficult terrain. You want the Tarrasque to become Godzilla and tear down buildings? Write that if it walks into a non-magical structure or object, it's destroyed. You're the Dungeon Master. You can bend reality and you can make your fantasy the truth. Never forget that. I've created mechanics tailor-made for what I want out of the Tarrasque. This is an unstoppable beast that does not care for 99% of the crowd control in the game and leaves destruction in its wake. This Tarrasque is almost unkillable unless you have several allies. A normal party is not killing this thing even at their peak. This is intended to sell the fact that this beast threatens the entire world. This brings us to design principle number 2, interactivity. Interactivity is the number of decision points that can change the end outcome of a conflict. The more interactive, the more decision points. On the outset, this Tarrasque doesn't seem very interactive. It seems to negate effects with no apparent drawback. However, its traits do provide more decision points if your fight has more objective-based play. Say you're trying to protect a city from the Tarrasque, this would be an incredibly interesting set of traits to deal with. Conjuring distractions or delaying it with crowd control can be ways to interact with it. Significant amounts of damage can be used to garner its attention away from important buildings or landmarks. When designing these traits, always consider what meaningful choices the players have to make against your monster every turn. Against this Tarrasque, there's always a few meaningful choices they can make on each turn. They can help evacuate people from the monstrosity, they can call on backup with spells like gate or communication devices, they can distract the monster with damage or large spells, or maybe even delay it with crowd control effects. Already, we have 4 viable options that can change the outcome of the fight depending on how they're used. For a more traditional combat, this is another example that may illustrate my point. Blackjack is a fake creature that's heavily inspired by classic casino games. Obviously, their main inspiration is the game Blackjack. This is their trait. This trait forces both the party and the enemies to play damage-based Blackjack. Every time one side deals damage, it contributes to their Blackjack total. The side that's closest to their Blackjack total at the end of the round wins a huge bonus that can swing the battle. If one side is above their Blackjack total, that side cannot win Blackjack. Every time the players pick between damaging options, they're making a decision about how much they contribute to their Blackjack total and the risk of going above it. This leads to some interesting interactions where they may use lower damage spells or not take opportunity attacks in fear of going above the total. Sometimes the players want to go above their Blackjack total to finish off an enemy or deal additional damage. It's another decision they can make. If your traits present only one viable option for your players, consider altering the environment or altering the traits. Always think about the decisions your players can make when designing your traits, and make your traits interesting to figure out in counterplay. Keep this in mind though, interactivity is not the same as balance. A creature with 1 hit point 0 AC that instantly kills the party as their action is technically very balanced mathematically, but it isn't interactive. There's no real decision making that changes the outcome. It's merely a dice roll to see who goes first. As usual, my mechanics above are just examples to get your brain moving. You could have mechanics where healing becomes damage, give the party a pop quiz in the middle of a fight, or anything else that comes to mind. Sky's the limit here. Here's my co-DM, Ty, who's going to wrap up the video with the last design principle.
And we've arrived at our final design principle. Keep it simple, keep it clean. Outside of flavor traits like water breathing, or foundational traits like legendary resistances or mythic actions, our monsters usually only have 3 unique homebrew traits, max. They are compact, dense, and focused. This makes them easier to format, easier to design a mechanical theme around, and makes it extremely easy to run as a dungeon master without any additional bookkeeping. Here's how I mentally categorize each of those 3 traits. Inexorable is the defensive trait. If a player hits me with any debilitating crowd control or effect, I'd be able to point at Inexorable, as it's given me a significant defensive buffer. Living Disaster is the offensive trait. It generates a lot of conflict and tension in any combat scenario the Tarrasque is in, and highlights its inevitable physicality. Primordial Entity is the win condition trait for the players. If it ever comes up, the players have probably won, or they're about to realize they're probably going to die. Your actions, bonus actions, legendary actions, and reactions should be all synergistic with your traits and one another in order to create an interesting and engaging stat block mechanically. One of his legendary actions is Toss, which throws a creature 100 feet away if it's being grappled or swallowed by the Tarrasque. This can move larger creatures or obstacles out of the way on its warpath towards an objective, which synergizes well with the Living Disaster. It's all a part of one cohesive package. Here's what you should not do. This would be a horrible thing to run. There's like 3 recharge abilities and like 37 traits and attacks. What the god fuck is happening in this stat block? A lot of homebrew stat blocks are like this, which is why they feel cluttered, unprofessional, and difficult to use. You could probably group like half of these actions or traits into something more cohesive and well designed, but a lot of these are very disjointed in general and distract from the main concept. When you are new to homebrewing, make sure that your monsters are easy to run for yourselves, and keep the traits dense and focused on its core mechanical themes and fantasies. To wrap it up, conjure a fantasy and make it real through your traits. Make your traits interactive and interesting to deal with. And last but not least, keep your traits and actions focused, condensed, and synergistic. If you're new to homebrewing, I would recommend modifying existing mechanics like HP, AC, or temporary hit points. But don't stifle your own creativity. Start mashing together some existing monster traits and see how it goes.
Like, comment about a cool monster trait you made, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for 10k subs, gang! I have YouTube memberships now. If you want to support me, go check it out. You can get some cool perks like getting custom monster item or dungeon designs from me, seeing your monsters show up in my games, and early access to my videos.